Good morning, Tenille, and welcome to the Entrepreneurship webinar module being run through MyElectricalCommunity. Perhaps just as an introduction to MyElectricalCommunity, it's a peer-to-peer business and social network for individuals with an electrical background. As far as this particular module is concerned, we are trying to provide examples of individuals that have been in business or that have been clear facilitators of those that have been in business. And I think you'd fit into both categories very well, Tenille. So the whole idea is to try and inspire those that are on the cusp of trying to see if business makes sense for them or not. Tenille, in introducing yourself, there is a long list. I'll try to do it justice. Tenille has been successfully building companies for around 11 years. She depicts the true essence of someone that's gone out there and charted her own destiny. In terms of her achievements, and there are many, Tenille was presented the Australian Leadership Award in 2013 for Digital Media and Philanthropy. She was also presented the Australian Financial Review 2013 Top 100 Most Influential Women Award. She also received the induction into the Western Australian Women's Hall of Fame by the Governor. Also awarded the Top 30 Under 30 Australian Leading Entrepreneurs of the Year for her work with the Global Good Foundation. And she was awarded the state finalist in the Telstra Business Woman of the Year. Tenille started her entrepreneurial background when she was 21, starting to invest into property and art. And by the age of 24, she left a senior position in the oil and gas industry and had built 3 businesses within the first few years of her entrepreneurial life. Tenille sits on the boards of several companies, large companies such as Radio Rentals, where she sits as a non-exec director, iiNet, where she sat as a non-exec director, and with iiNet being a public listed company, it would come with its own onerous obligations, so no mean feat. Global Good Foundation and Socialite Holdings Pty Limited. Tenille, you've got a long list of achievements. Welcome to the program. Perhaps if I could start off, Tenille, by asking you, how did the concept of wanting to be in business come to you?
Wanting to be in business. Well, when I look back, I asked my mum actually this question, and I said, have I always wanted to be a business person? Where did this desire come from? And at the age of 8, she told me a story. At the age of 8, I actually started my first business and didn't really know it. So I was kind of inbred. It was inbuilt in me. I had a 50-cent business or $1 business where I would walk dogs and clean gardens and clean dogs and cars, and I had an employee who I gave 50 cents, and then I would take 50 cents off the top. So I had business cards, and I was out marketing and didn't even realize I was doing it. So it was a very very interesting sort of concept to think about, that I had sort of been in business at the age of 8 and didn't even know it. So by the age of 17, I had sat down with my parents, and I said to them very, very strongly, I said, Mum and Dad, I'm not going to not going to go to university, and I'm just going to get straight into the workforce because I feel like I've got a lot I've got to do. So I just want to get in there and start earning money and learning about the world. And off I went. They were wonderfully supportive and always have been. And so off I went into the business world. And obviously I didn't have any qualifications or anything like that. So I started off my career as a receptionist and worked my way up in under a few years to be as high up on the ladder as you could possibly be in the administration world. And I was co-managing 20 other admins in a big oil and gas company. And from that point, I had this moment, I suppose, this realization. And from the ages of, and I specifically did administration because I knew I could kind of do that job standing on my head, because it was, for me, it was quite simple. It was very easy for me to do. So it didn't require a lot of, in my opinion, for me, not in saying that the job role does, but for me, my opinion, it didn't require a lot of like mental power for me. It allowed me the space to be able to be creative outside of work. And so by that stage, during the ages of sort of 16 and 23, 22, I pursued a music career. So I came from a very musical family, and so I went off and travelled around Australia. And some instances I was in the back of a truck with a harmonica and a guitarist, and we were off doing some great events and some really bad ones. And I was in discussions with Sony about getting a record contract, but my agreement to myself was that at 23, if I didn't make the goal of getting the record contract, which had fallen through, I said to myself I was going to stop, because I knew I was no longer marketable in the genre that I was in. So I made the decision to stop. So here I am now, still working in the admin field, and suddenly the one thing that I loved most of my life, I've stopped, and I'm sitting there thinking, well, what am I going to do now? Like, I knew I wanted to get into business and do something, and I always had a flair for business, just a natural flair. So then I asked myself the question, and so began the journey of becoming an entrepreneur. And I remember standing in a boardroom with a bunch of, probably about 20 men, and watching them and observing. I was always an observer, and still am. And sat down and watched them all, and I thought, I could do this business thing. I think I could give this a crack. So instead of, in true style, instead of doing one business, I did 3, because my version was that it would be, a diversification. I thought I'll try all 3 and see which one takes off first, and then that's one I'll run with. And I think any person who's an entrepreneur will agree with me that once you've had your first entrepreneurial seizure, you're never the same again. That was sort of, that's where it sparked, and the desire to do more, the desire to contribute more to my community, the desire to, for me, the overall goal is to leave this world in a better place than what it was, than what I came into it. So in whatever shape or form that might be, then that's what I'm pursuing, and it's taken me down the entrepreneurial path, and seen me build multi-million-dollar businesses and have massive failings as well. So
no, that's great, Tenille. In terms of before you started down this path, did you have a visual of what success meant for you? Because for people that get into business, success comes in different forms. What was your visualization of what success meant for you when you started on that journey, and how did you monitor yourself in the first 12, 18 months of that initial path?
Yeah, well, I was at an age where, and it's a great question, because I was at an age where for me, success was a financial success. So I was chasing the ego, the head-driven self, and I was coming from a place of wanting to set myself up financially so I didn't have to work for the rest of my life. So that was the initial part, and I was in that age bracket. They call it the return to Saturn, between the ages up to the age of 27, where it's all about the financial aspect and setting yourself up and setting up your nest. And so I started off with that in mind, that I wanted to reach this success. And of course, when you are chasing something that is unfortunately ego-driven and head-driven, not heart-driven, you tend to find yourself coming up against roadblocks all the time, and things don't seem to go well. And so my first 2 businesses didn't take off. The first businesses we did get an initial turnover of $400,000 in the first few months, but it was still not big enough or substantial enough. And so what ended up happening was I had to go through a reevaluation process. And I believe that success changes and evolves as we evolve as humans. We evolve as ourselves, and we become better versions of ourselves and become more aware of ourselves. And so as a process of that, I got to a point where the first couple of businesses didn't go so well, and then they went okay. And then I went instead of working from the head, and then I did the big mistake, which was, well, not a mistake but a challenge. It was a learning for sure. Was that I went from doing all head to doing all heart. So I ended up with my charitable organisation doing that voluntary full time for a year, tripling the bank balance to my charity, and then completely forgetting to do my own. And I'm sitting in a cafe, just about to sip a cup of tea, and I can barely afford the cup of tea I'm about to drink from. So I'm sitting there thinking, okay, I've got this around the wrong way. So hence comes forth the new reevaluation process of what can I do, and in this moment I was pretty distressed and suddenly had the realization that I had done all this work and I'd, you know, almost killed myself trying to raise some money for my charity, and just completely forgot about myself. And so what I ended up doing was looking at what I did in the charity and what I could turn that into a business. And that's where sort of my social media world began. And that was back in 2010, when there wasn't like a lot of social media organizations out there at this time, and especially in the corporate level. And so I found the need in the marketplace and I started hitting the ground running. And there is nothing like survival to make you just go for it, you know. And so in under 2 years, it became a multi-million-dollar business. But in answer to your question, the true defining moment of success came when I reached what I thought I was reaching, which was the financial success. And in the business, or not necessarily, you know, the business itself reached on the books a multi-million-dollar turnover. So to me, I thought, well, this is society's version of success. This is good. This is what I manifested. I created this. And then I had this absolutely defining moment where I walked in one day and I looked around and I hardly knew any of my staff because we were growing so quickly. And it sounds like a good problem, but it's not. I mean, I want to know my people, and it got too big too fast and I couldn't keep up with it. And I was under very poor contractual terms as well with a big organisation, which was causing a massive risk in the company. And so there were all these things floating around, and all of a sudden I just thought, I walked in one day and I just went, oh my gosh, this is perceived as successful. You walk in, you see it, it looks like society's version of success, but I didn't feel successful. I felt empty. I felt disconnected. I felt burnt out. I didn't feel like I knew anybody, and I lost my whole reason as to my why, you know. And this is the important evolution of any entrepreneur, is that that essence of the why will constantly evolve with you as you evolve when you're ready, you know. And so as I shifted from building the head logic stuff and trying to get profit driven and financial driven and completely forgetting about the heart again, then I brought it back into balance, and that looked a lot more like me. I took myself away with a butcher's papers and pen for 8 days in solitude, and I asked myself that very question: what does success mean to me? And to me, it didn't mean massive amounts of money. I mean, it's nice to have, but if that's on my authentic path, then so be it. But it was more deep. Had much more depth to it than that. You know, I wanted to contribute to humanity. I wanted to help our human family, you know, and do something that was beneficial in the world, as opposed to driving from just the pure profit-driven head logic or old business mentality, and being more about collaboration with people and community. And so I had this massive, you know, I suppose some people call it a breakdown, some people call it a spiritual awakening. I don't know. But either way, it was a big moment of defining that exact success and what it meant for me. But even now, and that was a few years ago, every year I redefine my success and what it means, and it becomes more and more balanced between heart logic and head logic, and really finding out how can I still be very, you know, because we live in a very head-driven world. So, you know, we need to be aware we are in this human experience. We've got to make money. It's part of the system. It's like, so that is a part of it, but it becomes deeper than that, and becomes more about connecting with people that are like-minded and doing things differently, changing the thought paradigms around what it means to do business. And so that was sort of where I got to. And every year what I do now is I pick a word. So when I define my success, I pick a word for my year. And last year was my yes year. And that took me to Everest. I said yes to going and doing things I would otherwise not do, and I ended up on Everest. So that was awesome. And then this year's adventure. So now I'm exploring this year with a sense of adventure and wonder. And so yeah, I think success can mean something completely different to any entrepreneur, but it's always I always stress to reevaluate that every year.
Brilliant answer. Look, that's great. It's interesting you say that, because success, obviously, as a definition in your own head, changes as you progress through life.
Yeah.
And so it's been an interesting journey that you've just conveyed to me. Now, as far as successes seem to have come, given the fact that you put your mind to what you wanted to achieve, but it would not have come without its challenges. While you were trying to figure out the headspace as to what's the right headspace to be into, what were some of the other challenges that you faced in establishing yourself as someone that earned money through alchemy, creating something out of nothing, rather than relying on an employer to pay you a salary. So, what were some of the challenges that you faced?
Yeah, look, massive. There are always massive challenges that come with it, but I'm kind of the belief that even though today I still feel uncomfortable with challenges, but I know that I need to go through them because it means I'm moving, I'm not standing still. So I kind of, with the awareness, I go, okay, well, this means I'm actually moving. I got to move that chair or move that obstacle out the way, and it means that I'm actually progressing and I'm not at a standstill point. So it means that I'm constantly evolving. But the challenges, some of the key challenges that I faced was really, it was around, I was in an industry that was new, and a lot of people were coming into my business, and a lot of this came down to me as well, with choosing your people wisely of who comes into your team. But I had a couple of instances where I had people who were starting up their own businesses and then taking my clients, and then there was all this stuff that went on internally in the company, and people trying to copy what I was doing, and I mean, it's not rocket science what I was doing, but there was this. For me, it came down to a big part of it came down to the company was going so fast and growing so fast that I couldn't keep up with the people connection. And when you start focusing on profit, you lose the people connection, and you lose the people connection, then you have all this stuff happen, And that was a big lesson for me, was that it wasn't about. It was about people. One of the biggest challenges as well that came about was, and that can happen, is as you start up in a business and you start getting your clients, and being aware of your contractual obligations with companies, and making sure that you do look after yourself, and you don't sort of just go, oh well, great, yeah, let's do that, and keep it on some short-term kind of contract. You want to make sure that you look at some longevity in your business. And one of the other biggest tools would be really asking yourself in every single piece of your business model, how can I make this residual? Where can I make this to become a replicable model so then it doesn't rely on me as much? And how do you work your way out of the business? And that's what I've been able to do with a couple of my businesses, is work my way out of them. And I think that's one of the key things, because all you're doing if you go into business is you end up buying your own job, and you're paying for yourself for your own job, and you're reliant on the month-to-month things. So instead of looking at per client basis, look at how can I get per client to be, and how can I generate longevity in that in, say, a 12-month period. So it gives you the space to be able to be creative and strategic and work on your business instead of working in it. So the residual side of it was really important, and that certainly gave me some freedom to be able to create and explore and do a bit of traveling and things like that as well. So I think it's important to look at those models as to how do you get longevity out of your business model. So one, how do you get longevity out of your business model? So how can you turn anything you've got into a residual and on an ongoing basis and deliver value, of course. Then the other one is making sure that you always cross your T's and dot your I's on any contractual obligations. The other one is making sure that you put your people first, and that you really do, the people first, then product, then profit.
Yep.
Is one of the learnings.
It would seem to me that as far as a typical model is concerned, a lot of people have an idea, have a desire, perhaps then try to focus on an idea. That idea might or might not have relevance in the market. So they may be going out there and creating the perfect mousetrap, so to speak. How did you figure out that social media, and how did you figure out that year was an idea that the market had a need for?
It was certainly a case of asking the question to myself. So when I was sitting in this cafe and I had tears rolling down my face and I didn't know how I was going to afford my cup of tea, and I was in a state of panic, but I managed to find the calm in the chaos. And I sat in that space and I said to myself, okay, well, what have I done that I can turn into a business? And what I did was through social media, through my own experience. I had people fly across from the US who I didn't even know, who were following me on Facebook, that then wanted to interview me for my work I was doing in my charity. And so something told me intuitively, a lot of intuition comes in here as well. I think it's important, but also you got to back it up with strategic analysis and things like that too. So, that's the heart and head stuff again, So the heart stuff is intuitive. How do you feel that it is going to be in the marketplace, and the sense of, like, for me, the sense that it had potential was through my own personal experience, because of the people I connected with all around the globe running my charitable campaigns. So that told me that there was a market for it. And then I thought to myself, well, what if that was for businesses? You know, imagine if businesses could connect with their consumers this quickly and have this kind of connection, but do it really strategically. And so that's sort of where I started to say, okay, well, what's the need in the marketplace? And I knew that overall that it was people did not really have a grasp on social media in this time. I knew that it was still very early days. And I then had a look at what was happening in the American markets and the UK markets, because they're typically ahead of us and they were already booming in social media, whereas it wasn't booming as much in Australia. So I looked at the comparison of countries as well and sort of saw what's working there and what's working here. And I knew that, okay, well, we'll be experiencing that boom eventually if they're doing that already. So then I also looked at what was the issues? So what were the issues that people didn't understand social media at the time? They didn't see it as a valuable resource. They couldn't validate bringing it in-house at this stage. So that really started to tell me that would define the model of what I was going to apply into the business place. So it was a combination of evaluating the marketplace and comparing, but also tying that in with a bit of intuition. And sometimes it can just be timing and good luck and a lot of hard work.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's interesting though, because what you've described to me is almost what individuals that might come up with a new technology might face. So if something's well understood, you can go and do your market research by asking individuals, how do you think this would work? But if it's a completely new concept and social media in Australia was new, people may not have experienced that. And in a similar manner, if someone had a great idea, came up with a technology, you can't go and do the market research on that, short of actually building a prototype. But how did you go and convince your first customer? I mean, how did you get your first customer?
Yeah. At the time, I had a great team member who was also helping on the ground and connecting with people. But the way that I did do it when I was sitting down with one of the customers that we signed up was I talked about the statistics in the marketplace. I talked about what was happening with the consumer market and what that meant, and how it was that they, I created I educated them. I spent the first couple of years just educating people because I knew that our market was still very not mature yet. So I really spent a lot of time just educating through workshops, teaching them about the channels and teaching them about the uptake of the people on the channels and that these people are their customers. And so I kind of created the need for them to see the value in it. And thankfully we had a lot of people already using it on an individual level, and now it was just transitioning over into the business space. And so it was about looking at that philosophy and saying, well, there's X million of people using it on average, X point something hours per day. So what we want to do is, connect with them on a business level so they can see. And if they're on there every day, then, and you're starting to get your brand out there, then they're going to see that. And so it was really about that, but it was also educating them about the new way of doing business in the modern world, and that this is our modern consumer, and the modern consumer wants to talk on these mediums. And so I kind of adapted that philosophy to it as well.
Okay. Given that the economy and the markets changed substantially, no longer is a permanent job secure. So if individuals were sticking to permanent jobs because of security, I mean, I tell people that that shouldn't be your premise for staying in the job. But if someone was to look at that in their 40s or their 50s, is it too late for them to start business? I mean, you started at a really young age. But if someone's sitting there thinking, geez, it's going to be really hard, are you able to respond to that?
I think it's only as hard as you make it out to be in your mind. The only barrier to anyone's greatness, and we've all got greatness. Every single one of us has got greatness inside of us. We all have an individual skill, an individual fingerprint. Everything about us is individual and unique, and we get given these skills and these gifts, and it's up to us whether we're going to use them. So I think it's just a mindset thing more than anything else. I mean, power of the mind is an amazing thing, and if we tap into that and realize that, yes, we can make excuses. Oh, it's my age, or oh, I don't have enough money, or oh, I can't do this, or I can't do that. Well, I could be using a lot of those excuses and adapting that to my interpretation of my story. We all create our own stories, and then we identify with the characters in that story and pretend that it's real when really it's not. It's all an illusion. We create our own illusion. So it's about how do we create that illusion to be manifest the things that we want, we desire. And it is purely comes down to making the decision. The only thing that will ever be the barrier to entry will be yourself. That's it.
You do a fair bit of work in Australia. I understand you do work outside of Australia as well.
Yeah, I've dabbled a bit in the global market. Yeah.
Okay. Do you have a sense of whether Australia is running at the same pace in terms of the percentage of individuals running businesses as compared to other parts of the world, the States, Asia, etc.? Or do you feel, in Australia, entrepreneurship and people being in business hasn't taken off as much as it has in other countries? And what could be the reason for it?
Yeah, I think that, I get a sense that in Australia, we're still on the upward curve for the global small business, and there's certainly an appetite for it. More and more people are doing it. Our next generation are already inbuilt to be entrepreneurs. Like they're just challenging the status quo. They're asking a million questions. They're like, well, I don't want to work till I'm 65. So their mindset is already shifting, and I think that that's where we will see the big uprise in the global small business will be the next generation of leaders, because they're already pre-programmed in many respects not to want to work till 65 and get their retirement check and that's it. They want to do it differently, and so I've seen, the American market is obviously very big in the entrepreneurial world. They're well and truly ahead of Australia in that respect. But they got more people. But I personally find that we have and it's getting more, it's getting bigger, it's getting faster. I'm finding more and more people are tapping into the global small business, and even corporations now are working a lot more with the small business. So we're finding that the small business is taking over. We had the industrial revolution, back in the day, and then we had the agricultural revolution. And now what we're seeing, and Daniel Priestley puts it beautifully, is the entrepreneurial revolution. And that's really where it's going. It is shifting that way. I feel like I feel positive, and that I'm seeing a lot more uptake in it. A lot more people are starting to realise that the current way the world is running, it's not serving us. It's actually, and it's not sustainable, so something needs to change. And more people are waking up to that, and the more people that wake up to that start thinking differently, and they're like, well, okay, what could I do to turn what I love into a business? And soon we'll find that there'll be another shift in business, where it'll be about the entrepreneur, but it'll be about being a conscious business leader. So how do we do business differently and consciously and collaborate versus compete? How can we work together to create perhaps a resource-based economy versus the current one that's not serving us? That's generations ahead, but I feel like that's sort of where we could be shifting. But I think Australia is still on the upward curve, definitely, when it comes to the entrepreneur.
Great. No, that's good to hear. In terms of individuals that might have a background in technology, obviously being in business requires a whole variety of other skills that would be needed. How do you propose someone that's got a very narrow inclination towards a particular aspect, broadening themselves to start to do other things? What would be in your case? I think you pretty much jumped in and swam really quickly, is from what I gather.
Yeah.
But how do you propose individual? What could be the different journeys that could come about for someone that's got a very single orientation around technology, but wanting to get into their own business? What sort of journeys could they follow?
So you're saying that if they've got So they're very narrow focused on just one thing. So
if let's say if they needed to know more about marketing, business planning, finance, sales, the legal aspect. Running a business, there's a broad variety of things that need to be covered. When one's coming from a background, let's say they've done their PhD, they've got an amazing product, but at that stage they're not probably ready and able to go to a venture capitalist to make the pitch. To make it very simplistic, actually, I've had some people come up to me and ask me a very naive question: would doing an MBA help me? And you know, I mean, I won't convey to you what my response is, but it's as simplistic as that. You know, as if doing an MBA would actually just take someone from where they are. But it does allow you. I mean, one of the things I found was that in being in an environment where others are equally inspired does help. But my question to you is, if someone's coming with a narrow focus, how could they go from there to running a business which requires a broader level of skills?
Yeah, well, I think the first step is they've got to have an open mind. They've got to be willing to be a student to all things. And it's almost like you realize you do, and I think you do understand, you know, what you're good at and what you're not. But when you first start out in business, it's all you. So how can you do it cleverly? How can you leverage your time cleverly to do the things and you know, master the things that you know you're good at, and then bring in people that can do the other stuff for you. But obviously when you're starting out in business, you don't have that luxury, unless you've got venture capital money and you got, you know, capital money to get you going, and you can get you know, hire people. But I would say that it's all in that journey. Being an entrepreneur is the learning, and I find that you know, if you keep an open mind to not just to working in business but to life, you know, if we stopped walking around thinking we knew it all, you know, we would actually learn a lot and realize we don't know much at all. Even the ones that know a lot don't even really know a lot. Some of the greatest leaders of our time never thought they were great leaders. You know, so it's this philosophy of understanding that we are always a student to everything that we learn. And as long as you're that willing student and you've made that conscious decision to be that willing student, then it's a great journey. It's an adventure. You know, you get to go through life and enjoy the adventure of it and treat it like an adventure. And it's not that serious. We're not getting out alive. So let's all just enjoy the process and take on the journey for what it is. So I would say for people who have that, you know, it's important to know your skill. It's important to know what it is that you're good at and being defined at that. But if you are stepping into business, you've got to be willing to put on multiple hats.
The discussion was more around, I guess, how do you get to be more broadly skilled? And I think what you were conveying to me was having an open mind, having a desire to learn. Is what you were conveying to me.
I think, you know, I think the main thing that I found is that you've got to be, you've really got to be willing to wear multiple hats at all times. You know, it's something that you can't be expected to step into being an entrepreneur and just do what it is you want. Because if you just do what you want, you're only ever going to get what you got. You know, you've got to make sure that you broaden the whole concept of being an entrepreneur. It's the biggest and most fundamental tool of self-development that ever existed. I mean, all these self-development courses are out there, but gee, go be an entrepreneur and you will learn a bucket load about yourself if you're willing and you're a willing student. I think it's all mindset again. It's like, I've always been a student to life, and whilst when I speak passionately about something I know, it's fantastic. But you know, when I don't know something, I'm going to say I don't know. But even the stuff that I do know, I still don't convey that I know it. I still think that there's so much more out there that I need to learn, and so much, you know, being a constant sponge. But then it's that fine balance between, once you reach that point and you know the difference between being a teacher and a student. You know, we're a student to life all the time.
Tenille, in terms of being able to get support, whether it's homegrown or external, how important is it for those in business, those starting business, to be able to get support, homegrown or external?
Yeah, look, I think support is the most important thing. One of the, all the top leaders have always had some kind of coaching system or coach or someone that they refer to, mentors. Look, I think that I constantly am working on self all the time and always looking for people to talk to and get advice from, but making sure you choose the people who you get the advice from, because every man and their dog wants to give you advice, especially when you're in business and they're like, no, I don't like that, or I don't. But validate the advice. Make sure that you first of all know who you're getting your advice from, and it's from someone that you admire and someone that you think has achieved something in what capacity that you're in the industry that you're in, or whatever it might be. But what I do is I often recommend to set up your own board, your own advisory board, right? Not kind of like a proper advisory board, but what I'm talking about is set up someone that you can go to, so you have these different people that you connect with for different areas of your life, and that's sort of where that helps a lot. I've found, is having that kind of philosophy.
Tenille, if you had to give advice to someone that was contemplating starting their own business, what would you tell them?
I would say the first and foremost thing is to sit down and really ask yourself, why are you doing it? Mm-hmm. What's your why? What's your why? Because your why is what's going to sell. You know, your why is what people are going to connect with. If you're getting into it just to get yourself out of your job because you hate it and you want to do something different, you know, reevaluate what your why is first and foremost, and spend a good amount of time on that and really get connected at a heart level with that, because that is what's going to connect with people.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. As far as any final words, Tenille, you know, if you had to provide any final words to this discussion, you know, what would be the final words to someone that's listening to a conversation like this?
The main reason of what I do, why I do, like I've worked with some of the largest brands in social media, and now what I'm doing is teaching small businesses, charities and startups how to get their social media plan in place. So if you're in that phase of identifying your why, and what you want to then do is work out your plan, then I'll give you a link to it, but hop on there and have a look at doing this course, because it's really going to help you get the best chance of success that's out there. So you're going to be able to tap into all my experience and get your plan going, because if you haven't got a plan for your brand, it's just not going to, you know, you got to make sure that you map it out and you know what you're doing, why you're doing it, how you're doing it. Don't just jump in and hope for the best. Sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't, and I've tried both, so I know. And make sure that, you know, I mean, I speak of this because I live in this space, but to think about the digital world and think about what your digital footprint's going to be. What kind of legacy are you going to leave online, and why should people care about what you're doing in the world? And that's what relates back to your why, but then making sure you've got a really good plan in place. And I've built a plan especially for entrepreneurs that I have worked with in social media, in business with some of the largest brands. And now what I've done is bring that planning system to entrepreneurs, small businesses and charities and startups that are doing something in the world to enhance humanity. So if they want the best chance of success, then definitely, if they get the chance, hop onto my page, and I'll give you the links, and that'll give them the right planning tools available to get onto the online world in the best and most effective way possible. So it saves them all the headaches.
And what is the link, Tenille?
Yeah, so it's digitalconsciousness.com.au.
Okay.
And I'll send you the link to that as well. And,
okay.
Yeah.
Sounds good. Tenille, thank you very much. The discussion has been great, not just for the listeners, but for someone like me. You certainly are inspirational. What you're doing is great, and I appreciate your time. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
Pleasure.